Hey students, before you get started with this video, make sure your math notebook is open in front of you. You're going to take these notes on the right-hand side, and you'll use the left-hand side for Edpuzzle questions, entry tasks, or any other notes you take during our time in class together. So the name of this section is 5.5 percents. And our learning target is I can write fractions as percents and percents as fractions. In order to do this, we need to define what a percent actually is. You've probably heard the word used before, but you may have not been totally sure exactly what it means. So let's go ahead and define it. A percent is just a part to whole ratio where the whole is 100. So what I mean by that is that if I were to say 60%, if I were to say you got 60% on this test, that means you got 60 out of 100. 60 is the part, and 100 is the whole. So a percent is just a part to whole ratio where the whole is 100. But sometimes a test might not actually be out of 100 points. It might only be out of 10, 12, 15 points. But we can still convert that to a percent, and that's what we're going to talk about first. We're going to talk about converting fractions to percents. So let's say there was a test and it was out of 4 points and you got 1 point correct. So your score was 1 out of 4. Well, we can't say this as a percent right now because the whole is not 100. The whole right now is 4. But if we turn the whole into 100, then we can say this out loud as a percent. So I need to ask myself, what do I multiply 4 by to turn it into 100? Well, that would be 25. In order to keep this ratio equivalent, I must multiply the top by 25 as well. 1 times 25 is 25. 4 times 25 is 100. So look at that. Now I do have a part to whole ratio where the whole is 100. This would be the same thing as 25%. So if you scored 1 point out of 4 on a test, that would be a score of 25%. Let's do a second example like that. Let's say we're not talking about the score of a test anymore. We're talking about some sort of mixed number, 1.5. And we want to figure out, okay, 1.5, what is that as a percent? Well, first, I need to change this into an improper fraction. So I use the acronym MAD, multiply, 1 times 2 is 2, add, 2 plus 1 is 3, and then denominator stays the same. Now that it's in the form of a ratio where we have a part and a whole, I need to change the whole to be 100. So I ask myself, what do I multiply 2 by to turn it into 100? That would be 50. To keep my ratio equivalent, I must multiply the top by the same thing. 3 times 50 is 150. 2 times 50 is 100. So now I do have my part to whole ratio where the whole is 100. That means I can finally convert it to a percent and say that this represents 150%. And it makes sense that our percent would be above 100 because our original fraction was more than 1, more than a whole. Okay, now that we've discussed that, let's talk about how we can convert a percent to a fraction instead. So we're going to start with the percent 35, so 35%. But we want to know what this is as a fraction. Well, I know that a percent is a part to whole ratio where the whole is 100. So 35% just means 35 out of 100. But this fraction isn't simplified. There are things that can go evenly into both 35 and 100. So I need to divide by those things to get my fraction simplified, to have it in simplest terms. The biggest thing that goes into both 5 and 100, not 5, 35 and 100 is 5. So I divide both by 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20. And I no longer have any common factors. Nothing goes into both 7 and 20 besides 1. So my fraction is simplified. And I know that 35% is the same as 7/20. Our last and final example. Let's convert 174% into a fraction. Again, because this is a part to whole ratio where the whole is 100, I can just write it as 174 over 100. Now I'm going to need to simplify it. So there's going to be 2 steps to simplify this one. I'm going to first want to divide by any common factors. I want to figure out if there's anything that goes evenly into both 174 and 100. Once that's done, I'm going to want to convert it into a mixed number. You might look at this and think, I have no clue what goes into both of these numbers. Well, if both of your numbers are even, if they end in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, you can always divide them by 2. So let's just go ahead and do that. 174 divided by 2 is 87. 100 divided by 2 is 50. Now that that's done, I can check again and see if there's anything that goes into both of these numbers. Well, I know that the only things that go into 50 are 5, 10, 25, and 50. None of those go into 87. So we've divided out all the common factors. Last step is to make it a mixed number. 50 only goes into 87 one whole time before it's too big. But there's still 37 pieces or 37/50ths left over. So 174% is the same as 1 and 37/50ths.